Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Jeffrey Halstead, DMD. Dr. Jeffrey Halstead has been Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, offering routine dental care as well as cosmetic dentistry, implants, and dentures by their highly trained and experienced staff. Visit them online at canandaiguadentistry.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram. Links1.com. This is the Debrief Podcast presented by Canandaigua Dentistry. I'm Josh Durso, joined by Peter Mantius. Jackie Augustine will be back next month. But in the meantime, we're going to get caught up with some of Peter's reporting from the last couple of weeks. He's the man behind the Waterfront on the Line, reporting on the Finger Lakes region's environmental issues. And it's been a busy couple of weeks. And Peter, I'd like to start there. How did these stories that came out back to back over the course of about 36 hours come to fruition? Was it all at once, or was it things that were kind of on the back burner for a span of a few weeks?
Yeah, I've definitely had my eye on these for a while, but I'm sort of taking it a little easy this summer and, traveling and spending time sailing and swimming and things like that. And then these things all of a sudden came, popped up and kind of certainly like the Cargill story came out of nowhere. But the Thurston thing, that's been brewing for a while. Greenidge has always got developments happening all the time. They had to file their second quarter report. So that was kind of anticipated that there would be something coming out of that. But anyway, yeah, it was definitely a busy 36 hours.
Yeah. And then obviously that's on top of all of the ongoing Seneca Meadows coverage that you've been providing like throughout the entire summer. But let's start with the Cargill story, which I thought was out of the three, the most interesting. You and I have had plenty of conversations off camera, off radio here about the salt mines underneath Cayuga Lake, the risks they pose, the questions around them. Cargill trying to sell its Cayuga Lake salt mine. Is it fully confirmed, or is it just a report that's kind of undercurrent at this point?
It's not only, it's just a report, and it's also a report that has not been picked up by the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or the New York Times. So it's at this point, it's a reporter's got a source somewhere in Wall Street or with a lawyer or somebody involved in mergers and acquisitions who says, hey, this is going on. But I don't doubt it. It was reported by The Deal, and a long time ago I was an editor at The Deal, and it's a very aggressive Manhattan website that competes with the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg for scoops on financial transactions all over the world. And they're good. They break a lot of stories like this, and so I have very little doubt. I mean, they're saying that Cargill has an advisor, Deutsche Bank, that is helping them sell the property, and not only the Cayuga Lake mine, but also the Cleveland mine. But it is certainly unconfirmed at this time. And I talked to the Cargill people, I asked them to comment, and they said we don't comment on industry rumors. So that's not unexpected.
Yeah. So I guess the kind of bigger picture question that a lot of folks had after reading this story is like, what are the implications of selling a mine of this scale and regionally? Like what would it mean? Like, how would that even happen? Like, is it as simple as just basically saying like, all right, well, I want to sell this to another entity and it's just a done deal? Or are there sort of like regulatory hoops that have to be jumped through?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not really sure what kind of regulatory hoops would have to, go through. I mean, I assume they'd have to transfer some pretty significant permits. Yeah. But the people at CLEAN, which is the Tompkins County group, which is, let's see, Cayuga Lake Environmental Action Now, I think it stands for, they're concerned that if the mine is sold, who is it going to be sold to? Is it going to be sold to some private equity group that's going to try to cut costs and cut safety and things like that, which would make things even worse than they already are? So they're very concerned about that, and they would, their sense is it almost seems like Cargill is trying to unload a financial and environmental liability and getting out while the getting's good. Right now they have only a $3.5 million bond on that mine. And if there was a catastrophic accident, like a roof collapse or any kind of hydraulic connection between the mine and the lake, you're going to salinate the lake. And that would be not in the millions, but probably in the billions of dollars of damage. So Clean is saying, hey, why doesn't the DEC just require a $1 billion bond? And I think they've got a good argument. They're saying, well, Cargill and the DEC saying, oh, it's all perfectly safe. Well, then good. That should make it pretty easy to buy a $1 billion bond. If it's safe, then the expense should be not that significant to get a big bond like that. So that's their argument. They're concerned that with who they might sell it to. And this is a little bit parallel, I think, to what happened on Seneca Lake when NYSEG was able to unload its salt caverns near Watkins Glen to a company called Energy that became Crestwood. Crestwood has since been acquired, but they unloaded those salt caverns back, more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, probably. Yeah. And those had a lot of environmental problems and financial issues there. And I think Cargill may be trying to do something similar to what NYSEG was trying to do, which is unload.
Yeah. And it seems like there's at least an undercurrent here of folks who would like to see the salt mines decommissioned, right? Like just shut them down completely. Yeah.
Well, even if you do that intentionally, I mean, there's a lot of question. How do you even do it? Do you fill that mine up with stuff? Do you just flood it? How do you even decommission a mine like that when the stakes are so high, given the lake that's above it? So there are a lot of questions there as to how you would even go about decommissioning it. But I don't think Cargill wants to do that. That's just an expense. They would rather get out, get free of the responsibility, and maybe get some money also on the side.
Fascinating to me because it seems like as little as your reporting has pretty much been all of the reporting on Cargill over the last couple of years, with a couple of exceptions being the Ithaca Voice doing some reporting as well. It's fascinating to me because of the magnitude and scope of the potential damage that failure or even decommissioning could pose on the region's largest lake. Is just wild. Like that is it's right. Intense.
Well, I know I've tried to interest other media outlets, national media outlets on this, but so far no takers. So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
That is true. And of course, let's talk a little bit about sludge here. We were talking about sewage sludge. Thurston, the town of Thurston, moving towards banning the field spread of sewage sludge. Give us kind of the 411. We've talked about it before, but give us kind of the 411 on where the town stands in this process.
Thurston is a little Steuben County town. It's about 15 miles northwest of Corning. A local farming family has been spreading municipal sewage sludge on about 2,700 acres since the 1970s or 80s. I mean, for a long time, 4 decades plus. So last summer, Casella, which is a regional waste company based in Vermont, but pretty dominant throughout New England, Casella came in and either bought or leased virtually all of those fields from the Dixon family. So now it's asking the DEC to transfer the Dixon spreading permit to itself, and it also wants to add a major new source of sludge from Long Island. And the DEC is considering this. Well, meanwhile, in February, the Thurston Town Board, which was totally in the dark for months about this Casella transaction. Casella didn't tell anybody locally or didn't tell anybody, any officials. The town board passed a one-year moratorium on newer expanded waste projects in the hopes that would pause whatever Casella was up to. But Casella is claiming now that there wouldn't be any net increase in the amount of sludge that's always been spread. They're saying, yeah, we may take some from Long Island, but then we'll decrease other amounts of sludge that we take. And the DEC seems to be buying that argument and may be ready to, grant its applications for the permit transfer and for the new source from Long Island. But many Thurston residents are super skeptical. They're sick and tired of the sludge. Most of them can no longer drink their well water. So the town board now plans to vote on a total sludge ban later this month. And that, a total sludge ban wouldn't have like a grandfather clause, like, oh, you've already been doing it, you get to keep doing it. No. You can't spread sewage sludge in the town. That's what the ban would be. So it's pretty hard line. Meanwhile, the DEC could rule any day on the permit transfer and the authorization to start accepting Long Island sludge. And people from Casella have told me that they're kind of planning on starting the spreading, presuming they get the permit transfer. They're planning on starting in September or October, spreading. So we'll see. And then, this whole Steuben County drama is playing out as Governor Hochul's DEC is defending a state draft waste management plan that calls for a doubling of sewage sludge spreading statewide on fields by 2050. So this fight is part of a much broader issue in not only New York State, but even New England and countrywide, because the problem is that this sludge has been found repeatedly to have PFAS forever chemicals in it routinely. So that's one of the problems. It has a lot of other stuff in it too, heavy metals and things. But anyway, that's the
Seems
summary.
To pretty aggressively fly in the face of what would be very basic environmental protections for people who, for example, have wells. I mean,
right.
This is, it seems like it would be cataclysmic for those people if this continued. But it's interesting that the state's perspective seems to be almost opposite of what the town is trying to do. Is there could the state step in and say, sorry, you can't have this? I mean, I know home rule exists, but does that I don't think that covers this sort of thing.
I think it's going to be fascinating to find out how this unwinds, because the moratorium, the people who wrote the moratorium, they thought that would stop certainly the addition of this giant new source of sludge. Hey, we said no expansions of waste projects, but the DEC is apparently not reading it that way. They're taking Casella's position that there's going to be no net increase in the amount of sludge that spreads. So, hey, that's fine. We're not going to be touching your moratorium. So that's an interpretation of that law. So how are they going to deal with a ban? I did ask a Casella official about that. I said, is the ban more of a concern than the moratorium? And he said, well, really, the moratorium was insignificant to us, but the ban, yeah, that's a problem. But he didn't want to go a lot further without talking to the lawyers and figuring out how are they going to deal with that.
Right. Interesting stuff. Let's talk a little bit about Greenwich. The company apparently plans to sell its South Carolina Bitcoin operation. What's it mean for the company as a whole? The company hasn't been doing well, right, for at least a year now. Right.
So Greenwich announced last week that it was going to sell its Bitcoin operation near Spartanburg, South Carolina, and they're selling it to NYDIG, NYDIG, which is one of their two main lenders. And really, this is all about Greenwich's debt overload. Several months ago, Greenwich sold almost 3/4 of its 38,000 Bitcoin mining machines in Dresden. to NY Dig. So they've already sold almost 3/4 of what they have up in Dresden, and now they're selling all of what they've got in South Carolina. Now they continue to host these machines there. In other words, these machines are operating just like they were when Greenwich owned them. But there's obviously a financial relationship now where the owners are also reaping the benefits of the Bitcoins that are reaped from this. So anyway, the whole point of this is to lower their debt, and I think they're smart to be doing that. They've got to lower their debt, and one way to do it is to sell the machines. And now maybe there are not a lot of buyers for the machines, but if you have a lender, and you go to that lender and say, well, we probably can't pay you, but we could pay you and by giving you a deal on our machines, and that's probably what's happened. It's a deal between a borrower and a lender. And so
anybody reading this story, should there be any question then what the implications would be for what Greenwich's operation is in Dresden moving forward? It seems like the company is like really in kind of rocky territory.
Well, they filed a quarterly report with the Securities and Exchange Commission, where you really have to fess up. You have to say, okay, here's what our status is. And in that, they again included the line that there is, quote, substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue as a going concern for a reasonable period of time. Now, that language is mandated by federal regulators. If you have a pretty good idea that you may not survive, you have to put that in your disclosure document to investors, so investors have some inkling as to what's going on. So that's a pretty big, at least yellow flag, if not red flag, depending on your appetite for risk as an investor. It also in the announcement, while they announced that they were planning to sell the South Carolina operation, they also said that their second quarter revenue had dropped to $14.7 million, which was down 36% from the same quarter last year. So the ongoing operation is also not doing particularly well. And the company's stock took a hit from the news, dropping more than 25% in a couple of days. And then earlier this year, you had the chief financial officer leaving abruptly, and you had the independent auditor saying it did not plan to renew its contract. These are all signs of a company that is, at least under stress. So it's very hard to predict what's going to happen to that company. Certainly, if there was a big, rebound in the market price of Bitcoin, the company's, fortunes could rise very quickly. But absent that, they are going to continue to have a big, big struggle to deal with the debt that they have, because they still have a lot of debt left. Yeah. They got rid of some by doing this transaction, but they've got a lot left. And their ability to generate income to pay down that debt or to even service that debt is, under a lot of strain.
Yeah. Peter, I hope you have a Labor Day break planned because you have been really working hard the last 30 days here. Anything on your radar on the horizon as far as coverage is concerned that people should be keeping an eye out for at Waterfront Online?
Well, in fact, I might even do a story later today. I haven't decided yet whether I'll write about it, but Doug Zamalis, who is an attorney for Waterloo Container, has written a letter to Mike Ferrara and the town board of Seneca Falls, basically saying that Seneca Meadows, in attempting to expand, is violating a specific provision of the host agreement that it has with the town of Seneca Falls, and we want you to sue over that, which is not a likely thing to happen. But I think it's sort of a shot across the bow, saying that there could be legal action if the town does nothing and does not enforce this very specific provision of the host agreement, the old host agreement, which I think is 2007, but there's not a newer one. And basically what that provision said was, until you have a new host agreement, you can't expand. well, they're well on the way to expanding. So there's some tension there. Now, there are a lot of legal details, so it's very hard to say who is exactly right on this. And that's going to be up to the court to decide.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, thanks for the time. As always, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Great. Thanks.